Good morning, Shavua Tov, V'Gotavach. Thanks for clicking on Kila Chari Torah's daily review of Maimonides' 613 Mitzvot, the Sefer HaMitzvahs for Sunday, the 9th of January. We began before Shabbat speaking about some of the days on which labor is prohibited, productive work. Malacha, you can refer to the day when we first talked about the Shabbos. I think that was last Wednesday or Thursday, someday in there, when we actually spelled out the 39 categories of productive labor, many of them having to do with agriculture, with preparing hides, animal hides, slaughtering, tanning, working the hides, and so on, to do with preparing a scroll, obviously. Others to do with building, construction. All of these, all 39 labors, are enumerated in Tractate Shabbat and have to do directly with construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, portable sanctuary that we took with us through the desert for 40 years and then into the land of Israel for many hundreds of years until the first temple was actually built in Jerusalem. Because the commandment of Shabbat is juxtaposed, it's right next to the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the Torah, so we derive from that, the sages of blessed memory derive from that anything that you had to do to build the tabernacle, all of the construction processes, those are the things that are forbidden on Shabbos. Okay, so we spoke about that. Then we talked about the prohibition of work, prohibition of malacha, of productive labor on Yom Tif holidays, with the exception of food which is to be prepared and enjoyed on that very day. So let's just continue along that. We have a few more points to make. The first of those is a prohibition of malacha on Rosh Hashanah. By the way, just to spell it out, we're talking about holidays of biblical origin here. If you have a question, why did Maimonides, why did the Torah itself have to enumerate, don't work on first days of Pesach, don't work on last days of Pesach, don't work on Shavuos, don't work on Rosh Hashanah. Why didn't you say don't work on the Jewish holidays? A number of reasons for that. Each one is a specific mitzvah on its own, pertinent to the day, the spiritual power of the day, if you will. In addition to that, we have other Jewish holidays which have taken their place in the calendar over the years, Hanukkah and Purim being among the most well-known of those, I guess the most well-known of those. Those holidays do not carry with them a prohibition of malacha because the Torah doesn't specifically mention in connection with them that you shall do no manner of productive work. You should do no malacha on those. So since the Torah doesn't prohibit it, we don't prohibit it also either. In other words, the only days for prohibition of labor where we actually have to rest, desist from interacting with the world in that way, are these holidays that we are talking about, Shabbos and the Yom Tovim that we're talking about. So Rosh Hashanah, which even in the land of Israel is kept for 2 days, it's a 2-day holiday, has a prohibition of work, of spiritual labor. I'm reading something here about spiritual significance of the first days of the first 10 days of the month of Tishrei. I caught the spiritual thing out of the corner of my eye there. There's a discussion in a number of places where it says maybe we shouldn't work all these 10 days from Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur because they're so powerful. It'll be like Chol Hamoed. Those days will be like Chol Hamoed. And some of the later Jewish codes of law, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, if I remember correctly, suggests that if possible, one should treat the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur like a Chol Hamoed and avoid any but the most necessary labor, spending one's time exclusively as far as possible on Torah study, prayer, and teshuvah, repentance. Okay, but that's a side issue. We're talking about the actual prohibition of work on Rosh Hashanah. We're not allowed to work on Rosh Hashanah. Hold that thought for a minute because we have another one coming up. The next one on Maimonides' list is working on the first day of Sukkot. The Sukkot holiday, which begins on the 15th of Tishrei, has a prohibition of labor attached to it, 15th and 16th for those of us living outside the land of Israel. And Shmini Atzeres, the next mitzvah, negative commandment number 328, prohibits work, malacha, productive labor, on Shmini Atzeres also, the 8th day of solemn assembly, which in the diaspora, in its 2-day form, has evolved into Shmini Atzeres / Simchas Torah. So those days are full of rejoicing in the Torah, dancing, singing, and rejoicing with one's entire being, and a prohibition of labor, which we'll find explained in Tractate Be'ah. Next mitzvah, I'm not 100% sure myself why these are listed in the order that they are, but I'm sure the Rambam had a svara here, logic Maybe it's the way they appear in the parsha. I can't remember. Anyway, the next one, a prohibition of working on Yom Kippur. Seems obvious, and maybe you could derive it from the fact that Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is called a Shabbat Shabbaton, Shabbat Shabbaton. It's the Sabbath of all Sabbaths, the granddaddy of them all, you might say. We are prohibited from working on Yom Kippur. We should not do any productive work. Even the permission of Ochel Nefesh, like we mentioned in connection with the other holidays, we're not going to be eating on Yom Kippur. Of course, you'll ask, what about the big break fast afterwards? So there is a conversation in Halacha about keeping food warm throughout Yom Kippur, so it's ready to eat. He said in our lands, it's the custom not to do that. That, I think, is the language of Kitz Shulchan Aruch from Central Europe, from whence many of our ancestors come. So so we don't cook even for after, especially after Yom Kippur. The whole prohibition is not to do things on Yom Tov that pertain to the day after. So certainly, if we were going to prepare food for the night after Yom Kippur, which is no longer Yom Kippur, we would be prohibited from doing that. But even to keep food warm is a question, and preparing food itself is in general let's call it frowned upon, at least if not outright prohibited, because of course children have to eat even on the fast day, and so on, and someone who's sick as well. Okay, we will leave it there. That covers all the prohibitions of work on Shabbat, Yom Tov, and the other holidays, the Yom Naraim, high holidays. Please join us again tomorrow, and we'll continue our march forward through Maimonides' Sefer HaMitzvos. Have a good day and a good week.